Quick video about when you shoot to RAW plus JPEG where those files are. Now I am shooting it to a Canon camera, and that's what we're looking at. I took the memory card out of the Canon camera and I stuck it inside the memory card reader in my computer, and that's what we're looking at right now. So this is the memory card. It may differ slightly based upon each particular make or model of computer, but in general, once you get into where the files are stored in your particular camera, it'll be the same. So on my particular Canon card, there's a miscellaneous folder, and that really doesn't have anything. There's something that's labeled DCIM, which contains the images. And you'll see inside that as a subfolder says 100 Canon. So we'll open that. And inside there are basically two versions of every file, and they look identical, more or less. There's a very slight difference that you might be able to notice inside the preview on the right here. So if I click on the CR2 file, that's the RAW file. If I click on the JPEG file, that's the process using the settings that really are dialed into the camera JPEG version of that file. Same thing for each of these. You can see here's the RAW and here's the JPEG version. So for each file, I basically have two copies of it. And the JPEG files you can work with by submitting those, for instance, to Flickr, anything that you need a JPEG for. But anything that's RAW, and a RAW file will be a CR2 or now a CR3, I believe, with later Canon models. It'll be an NEF with the Nikon models, ARW with the Sony models, and there are more for each make of camera out there. You'll have those. Now, those will not open. So if I double click, for instance, on this JPEG file of this bird feeder, I'll see it opens up inside whatever my default image reader is. I'm on a Macintosh, so that's going to be the preview program. Those of you that are on Windows, it'll be the Windows version of that image reader that it has. So if I go to the other file that's a RAW file, and we double click on that, if I don't have something installed, it won't open up at all. If I do have something installed, in this case, I have the full Photoshop suite with Adobe Bridge and with the Adobe Camera RAW editor installed, it'll open something that can read it. And the Adobe Camera RAW editor is what I'm talking about. That's a program that can read it. So it opens it up here inside of the Camera RAW editor. And I don't necessarily have to do anything with this. I can just turn it in for the first, I want to say 4, maybe 5 assignments that you guys do. I just need to see that you shot in a RAW mode so that I know you know how to shoot to RAW. But as you get to later assignments, you may want to start processing the RAW. And it will help for you to think of that RAW file as a negative in the old days of film. In other words, nothing I do is going to change this file. It's a persistent file. It's a file that's non-destructive. So, no matter what we do inside this developing module here, I'm not going to change the file. So I'm looking at this and it looks a bit dark to me. Maybe I'm going to click on the exposure and raise the exposure about a full stop. You can see that's a little bit brighter. I can play around with any of these settings. I can reclaim area from the shadows if I want to reclaim some of the areas of the shadows. If I want to maybe decrease or have more definition in the white areas, we can do that. There's just a whole host of edits that we can make as we kind of scroll through this. Some of you may have some experience with Lightroom. This is basically very, very similar to the developing module. We'll get into some of the reasons why you might want to use one or the other specifically, but that's basically it. So this is my RAW file. If I'm done with it, I can click done. If I want to go ahead and open it and work on that file some more inside of Photoshop, I can do that. And then when I save the file, it's not going to change that RAW file at all. So I'm just going to go ahead and click done with these edits that I made. And we're going to go back to my files here. And you'll notice I now have a 4687 CR2, that's the RAW, 4687 JPEG, but now I have this thing called a sidecar file. Anytime you create a RAW file and then you edit it, all those edits are stored in this file. In other words, nothing really changes with that original CR2 file. That CR2 file will never change. If I double click on to open that CR2 file, you'll see those edits are there, but that's because it's reading that XMP, that sidecar file. So what I'm going to do as an experiment is I'm going to get rid of that sidecar file. I'm going to just drag it to the trash. If I moved it out of the folder, it would do the same thing. The computer is not smart enough to know, where I hit it. And I can go back to that sidecar file, that 4687 file. I'll open it, and what you'll see is pretty much the original RAW file. Nothing changes. All the changes are stored in that sidecar file. Why would you want to do that? Well, because the way your RAW file works is it captures all the possible data the sensor can capture. That is why it is so much larger than the JPEG file. What it gives us is a lot of editing flexibility. So we can come in and we can do all kinds of edits to it. Let's say you guys, one of the early assignments that you do is going to be white balance. Let's say white balance wise, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. You forgot to do it. And so you shot it and the white balance is wrong. We can change the white balance right here to kind of see some of the different options. And sometimes you'll do it just to manipulate, to make things look a certain way. There's tungsten. That's not a good look. But there's fluorescent light, and you can set it for if you were using flash. And then you can play with the custom white balance here too. We can make the temperature look a little more cold and desolate. We want to make it look very foreboding and isolating. And that's sort of a decision where we're manipulating reality because we want to be communicative with it. Some photographers are more documentarians, meaning that they want to show exactly what reality is, and so they will not do something like this. They want to try and get it as much as possible to reflect exactly the conditions and the way the thing looked. But there's a plethora of editing options available to you because you are working with RAW that just aren't as available with JPEG. We can do some edits to JPEG, but you're going to hit a ceiling with JPEG where that data, there's just not enough there because JPEGs basically are a compressed or lossy file and it throws away a lot of data. I hope this helps you understand the advantage of RAW and how to set your camera up in the previous video to shoot RAW as well as JPEG and where the different files are on your video card as we take a look at that. See these here. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ask.